Hello, friends. If you're curious about the movie Adolescence 2025, you're in the perfect place. Don't forget to give this video a quick like, it really helps us out. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to stay updated on all the latest movie deep dives. Let's jump right in. It begins in the quiet spaces where memory meets longing. In the cigarette-burned edges of high school notebooks, the shadows cast by locker doors, and the breathless hush before someone says something they can't take back. Adolescence is not just a coming-of-age film. It is an emotional excavation, a slow, immersive plunge into the world of teenage years when everything is too much and yet not enough. A film that feels like a lived experience more than a scripted narrative, soaked in the colors of nostalgia and rebellion, tenderness and fury. Set in a sun-bleached suburbia that feels suspended between time zones and realities, the film follows 17-year-old Nolan Gregg, a boy too observant for his own good and too unsure of what to do with everything he sees. Nolan is neither outcast nor hero. He occupies that liminal teenage space, visible but unseen, aching with questions he doesn't yet know how to ask. He isn't trying to save the world. He's just trying to survive it. To find out what comes after the ache of first love, after the sting of betrayal, after the numb hum of loneliness that becomes louder when the hallway goes quiet. The camera clings close to him, tracking his slow unraveling like a ghost tethered to his shoulder. There's a certain warmth to the film's visuals. Grainy textures, golden hours, dusk-lit windows, that plays in contrast to the rawness of its story. Director Lena Hawthorne crafts Adolescence like a confession, intimate, unfiltered, and unwavering in its honesty. It doesn't try to dramatize teenage life with melodrama. Instead, it captures its chaos and contradiction with stunning clarity. The euphoria of being alive one moment. The devastation of feeling nothing the next. Nolan's world is populated with faces that feel like fragments of himself. His best friend, Jude, sharp-tongued and brilliant, hiding behind sarcasm to mask a growing fear of abandonment. His older brother, Micah, recently returned from college and suddenly unreachable, changed in ways that Nolan doesn't have the language to articulate. His mother, distant, distracted, swallowed by a divorce that hollowed the house without ever making a sound. And then there's Eden. Eden enters the story like a summer storm. Fierce. Wild-eyed. Impossible to ignore. She's the new girl at school with secrets folded beneath her smile, and Nolan is drawn to her not because she makes sense, but because she doesn't. She talks like no one else. Thinks like no one else. She sees through the static. For Nolan, who has spent most of his life observing the world from a step behind, Eden is the first person who turns to face him head-on. She doesn't ask him to explain himself. She dares him to feel something. Their connection is instant, but not simple. There's no slow-burn montage of teenage romance here. It's electric, yes, but also volatile. They push each other into corners neither of them are ready to stand in. What begins as infatuation quickly twists into something deeper, something far more difficult. Love that doesn't just lift but breaks. They mirror each other's darkness. And the closer they get, the more it becomes clear that Eden isn't running toward Nolan. She's running from something else entirely. The film unfolds in chapters, like entries in a diary Nolan never writes. The first half of the story explores the weight of expectation, academic pressure, masculine ideals, the suffocating demand to figure things out. Nolan stumbles through school days that blur together, phone calls with his absent father that end in silence, moments of joy that arrive without warning and vanish just as quickly. Through it all, the camera never rushes. It watches. Waits. Like Adolescence itself, the story is lived moment by moment, never warning you when something important is about to happen. And then it happens. A night that begins with stolen beer and laughter ends in a violent, life-changing accident. One of those events that cleaves life into before and after. A car, a scream, shattered glass. Nolan walks away physically intact, but emotionally fractured. The trauma becomes a fault line. The world doesn't slow down to let him process it. It just keeps moving. And in that relentless march forward, Nolan begins to unravel. Eden pulls away, haunted by her own guilt. Jude becomes angry, withdrawn. Nolan's mother, sensing something's broken, tries to bridge the gap, but it's too wide. It's in this silence that the film deepens. It stops being just a portrait of youth and becomes a study of grief, the grief of innocence lost, of connections severed, of futures changed in an instant. And still, Nolan searches for meaning. For someone to tell him what the accident meant, what any of it means. But the film doesn't give easy answers. Instead, it gives Nolan choices. Painful, real, imperfect choices. Does he reach out or retreat? Does he forgive or harden? Does he risk love again or protect what little he has left? One of the most powerful sequences comes in the final act, when Nolan visits Micah at his college. Their conversation is awkward, halting, not wrapped in emotional bows. But it's there that Nolan begins to understand that everyone is lost in some way. That adulthood is not a destination, but a series of redefinitions. That maybe it's okay not to be okay. The film never says it out loud, but it whispers something beautiful. Growing up isn't about having answers, it's about learning how to live with the questions visually. The final scenes bloom with soft light, as if the world is beginning to forgive itself. Nolan stands at a train station, not to run, but to breathe. He's not fixed. He's still broken in places. But he's facing forward now. The past hasn't disappeared. It clings to him like smoke, but it no longer holds him still. Adolescence doesn't end with a twist. It ends with truth. With the quiet understanding that the hardest part of growing up isn't surviving the big moments. It's learning how to carry the small ones. The glances. The losses. The love you weren't ready for. The goodbye you never got to say. What makes the film so haunting isn't what happens, it's how it makes you feel what doesn't. The spaces between the words. The pauses in the conversation. The way Nolan looks out the window when no one's watching. That's where the story lives. And that's where it stays, long after the credits roll. So if you're expecting the usual coming-of-age tale, Adolescence will surprise you. It's not about prom nights or first kisses wrapped in pop songs. It's about the messy, beautiful, devastating truth of what it means to become yourself. To ask questions with no answers. To hold on when everything tells you to let go. And somewhere in that journey, you might just find a piece of your own story, too. It begins with a sky too pale for morning and a silence too loud for comfort. The kind of morning where everything feels like it's holding its breath. Nolan Gray, 17, lies awake before his alarm, already dressed in the clothes he wore yesterday. It's not insomnia. It's something quieter, more familiar. A kind of numbness that seeps in slowly over time. His room is dim, messy in a way that suggests resignation rather than rebellion. There's a dent in the drywall. A Polaroid pinned to the window frame, bleached from sunlight. A half-finished drawing taped to the back of the door. Outside, the world stirs. The quiet suburb of Dunvale is caught in late spring's lull, the grass beginning to yellow, the trees caught between blooming and shedding, everything hanging in the air like a breath unexhaled. It's Nolan's last semester of high school, but nothing feels like it's ending. If anything, it all feels stuck. Like the clock is ticking but the hands aren't moving. Nolan eats breakfast in silence. His mother, Lynn, doesn't speak much anymore. Her eyes stay on her phone or float through the kitchen window like she's waiting for something to come back. Someone, maybe, but never says who. She sips her coffee, grimaces, and leaves the room like a ghost still remembering how to walk. Nolan watches her go, then reaches for her mug. He drinks what's left of the coffee, wincing at the bitterness. It's something he started doing after his father moved out. A ritual. An echo. School is a blur of fluorescent lights and institutional gray. The halls are lined with lockers dented from years of careless use. The walls are plastered with motivational posters curling at the edges. Nolan moves through it all with a kind of practiced invisibility. He's not bullied, not idolized, just there. A fixture. His teachers know his name, but rarely say it. His classmates nod at him in passing but don't ask questions. He's the kind of kid who people describe with words like quiet or serious, but never really know why. Jude is the exception. Jude is chaos wrapped in thrift store denim and black eyeliner. He's Nolan's best friend, though even that label feels insufficient. Jude doesn't believe in labels. Or anything else, really. He smokes clove cigarettes behind the gym and carries around a camera loaded with black and white film. He says it's for capturing the truth no one talks about, though most of the photos are of graffiti, abandoned houses, or reflections in puddles. Jude talks like he's auditioning for a play no one's ever written and dresses like he's trying to be remembered by someone he hasn't met yet. He's brilliant, brittle, and the only person who truly sees Nolan for who he is, or maybe who he could be. The two of them spend their lunch breaks in the art room, even though neither of them takes art anymore. They sit on the floor by the supply closet, eating vending machine pretzels and dissecting the world like it's a patient on the verge of collapse. Jude talks about moving to New York. Nolan listens and nods, pretending he could imagine it. The truth is, he can't imagine anything past June. That's when Eden arrives. She walks into second-period English like she stepped out of another timeline, one where things are more vivid, more urgent. Her hair is half-dyed, her boots scuffed, her expression unreadable. She introduces herself with a shrug and takes the seat by the window, 2 rows over from Nolan. There's something about her that feels misaligned, like a record playing slightly too slow. She doesn't look around the room. Doesn't try to smile. Just takes out a notebook already covered in ink and begins to write in looping cursive. Nolan doesn't speak to her at first. He watches. He notices. She draws in the margins of her pages, moths, mostly, with curling antennae and delicate wings. She chews on her sleeves. Her laugh, when it eventually escapes, is sharp and short, like it surprised her. It's Jude who breaks the ice. He corners her outside the library with some comment about Kafka and asks if she smokes. She doesn't. But she walks with him anyway. Soon, she's with them during lunch. She doesn't talk much. But she listens. And every now and then, she says something that makes Nolan stop breathing for a second. Something true. Something no one else says out loud. Their friendship forms like fog, slow, then suddenly everywhere. Nolan finds himself walking home with Eden after school. He learns she lives with her aunt. That she moved here after things went sideways in her last town. She doesn't elaborate. Nolan doesn't press. He tells her about his brother, Micah, who left for college and barely calls. She asks if he misses him. Nolan says he's not sure. She tells him that's okay. Most people miss things they can't name, she says, and it sticks in his ribs like a pin. There's a night, a few weeks later, where everything starts to tilt. Jude throws a party at his house while his parents are out of town. It's the kind of party that spreads by word of mouth. Half the school shows up, plus strangers no one can name. The music's too loud. The lights too low. People wander in and out of rooms like they're looking for something and forgetting what it was the moment they enter. Nolan finds Eden upstairs, sitting alone in Jude's bedroom, staring at a cracked photo on the dresser. She doesn't say anything when he walks in. He doesn't either. They sit on the bed together in silence, the bass from the music below vibrating through the floorboards. Then she kisses him. It's not soft, not hesitant. It's desperate, like she's trying to escape into him. Nolan doesn't pull away. But afterward, she stands and says, "Don't make this into something." He doesn't know what to say, so he says nothing. In the days that follow, something shifts. Eden still sits with them at lunch, still walks home with Nolan, but there's a wall now, thin but solid. She doesn't touch him, doesn't look him in the eye for too long. Jude notices, asks questions with his eyebrows. Nolan shrugs them off, pretends everything is fine. It isn't. Then comes the night of the accident. It starts simple. Nolan, Eden, and Jude pile into an old sedan borrowed from Jude's cousin. They drive aimlessly, as teenagers do, the windows down, the music loud enough to drown out their thoughts. They end up at the edge of town, near the old quarry where no one's supposed to go. They drink cheap vodka mixed with juice. Eden laughs, wild and luminous. Jude climbs onto the roof of the car and screams into the night. Nolan watches her, feeling like something important is slipping away before he can name it. And then, someone suggests a race. It's dumb. Reckless. But in that moment, it feels like the only thing that matters. They never make it to the finish line. One wrong turn. A flash of headlights. A curve too sharp. The crash isn't cinematic. It's fast. Loud. Followed by a stillness so complete it doesn't feel real. Jude breaks his wrist. Eden hits her head. Nolan walks away with a cut above his eye and a tremor in his hands that won't stop. There are no sirens. They call no one. They limp back to town in silence, the car abandoned at the edge of the road. No one speaks of it again. But the silence grows teeth. The space between them, between Nolan and Eden, between Nolan and himself, widens. Days pass. Then a week. The world doesn't slow down. School continues. Teachers assign homework. The sky stays blue. But Nolan isn't the same. The light feels too bright. The noise too loud. His drawings grow darker. His silences longer. Eden avoids him. Jude grows colder. And Nolan, for the first time, feels like he's watching himself from outside his body. The questions start then. Not from others, but from within. What really happened that night? What did he feel when Eden kissed him? Why does he feel responsible? Why can't he talk about it? He doesn't know it yet, but everything is about to shift. The version of himself he's known, the quiet observer, the passive drifter, is about to fracture. And in the cracks, something new will begin to take shape. Not clarity, not peace, but the beginning of something raw, painful, and necessary. The beginning of becoming. It lingers for days, the crash, or rather the silence afterward. Not just the physical silence, the way no one speaks about it, but the kind that seeps into the corners of Nolan's world. The kind that changes how the air feels, how he walks through his own house, how he hears his own voice. No one has said it out loud, not even to themselves, but something ended that night. At school, the days blend together like smeared chalk on a blackboard. People talk about upcoming finals, college applications, prom. But for Nolan, those words feel like they belong to another language. His mind replays the sound of the tires skidding, the sickening crunch of metal against rock, Eden's sharp breath as she stumbled out of the car with blood dripping from her forehead. He sees it when he blinks. He hears it in the spaces between sentences. Eden doesn't sit with them anymore. She's still in school, still present, but it's as if she's vanished behind some invisible wall. When he tries to catch her eye, she looks past him. Like he's someone she's trying not to remember. Jude, on the other hand, swings hard in the opposite direction. He throws himself into noise, louder jokes, riskier behavior, endless sarcasm. But underneath it, Nolan sees the crack. He sees the way Jude flinches when people bring up cars. The way he chews on the end of his sleeve until his knuckles go white. One afternoon, Nolan finds Jude behind the gym again, alone this time, the camera hanging limp around his neck. "You ever think we made it out when we shouldn't have?" Nolan asks. Jude doesn't answer for a long time. Then, without looking at him, he says, "Maybe we didn't." The weight of it lands between them, and nothing else is said. Nolan starts to draw again. Not for class, not for anyone else. Just lines, shapes, shadows that don't make sense until they do. His sketchpad fills with empty roads, cracked windshields, Eden's eyes. Always her eyes. Wide, unreadable, like they're searching for something no one can give her. He tries to make sense of what's happening, of how everything felt so possible just a few weeks ago, and now feels like it's already behind him. Then one day, she's gone. Eden doesn't show up for class. Her seat stays empty. By lunch, whispers ripple across the halls. She's not sick. She didn't move. She just left. No goodbyes. No explanation. Just disappeared, like she was never really part of this world to begin with. Nolan walks home in the rain that day, not caring that his clothes are soaked through. He passes her street, the one she used to take when they walked together. The house looks the same. Quiet, still, lights off even though it's already dark. There's a dull ache in his chest that won't let up. Not anger. Not sadness. Just the sharp loneliness of unfinished conversations. In the following days, he starts hearing pieces of the truth. That Eden had been in foster care before her aunt took her in. That this wasn't her first school, or her second. That she had a record, truancy, possession, something vague and whispered. That maybe what happened that night wasn't the first time she ran. That maybe it was the only way she knew how to survive. But none of it feels real. Not to Nolan. Because he didn't see a runaway. He saw a girl who noticed things, who spoke in metaphors and flinched at loud noises, who kissed like she was trying to remember how. He doesn't tell anyone this. He just holds it. Carries it like a weight stitched into the lining of his jacket. Then comes the letter. It's not mailed. It slipped into the pages of his sketchbook, found days later when he's flipping through looking for a blank page. The handwriting is unmistakable. Looping. Slanted. Hers. It isn't long. Just a few sentences. I didn't leave because of you. I left because of me. You made me feel seen, and that terrified me more than anything. I didn't know how to be that version of myself for very long. Thank you for trying to find me, even when I was hiding. Don't stop looking, for anything. Even when it hurts. It's unsigned. Doesn't need to be. Nolan reads it over and over. The words blur. Then sharpen. Then blur again. And for the first time in weeks, he cries. Not because she's gone, but because he finally understands. That night didn't break her. It confirmed something she already believed about herself. That she couldn't stay. That when people got too close, they left bruises, on her or from her. And even if that wasn't true, it was the story she'd chosen to believe. And believing it meant leaving was the only ending she trusted. Spring fades into summer with a kind of lazy inevitability. Nolan finishes school. Barely. His grades take a hit, but no one pushes too hard. His mother notices the change but doesn't know how to ask. Instead, she starts sitting with him during dinner. Sometimes they talk. Sometimes they don't. But she stays, and that means more than words. Jude and Nolan drift. Not apart completely, but like magnets with flipped poles. They orbit each other, circling old memories and shared ghosts. They don't mention Eden. Not once. But they both carry her, and maybe that's enough. Micah comes home from college briefly, quieter than usual. He and Nolan share a beer on the porch one evening. They don't say much. But as they sit there, watching the stars fade in, Micah nudges Nolan's arm and says, "You're stronger than you think." It's the first time in months Nolan believes someone when they say something like that. He starts drawing again with purpose. He signs up for a community art course. He goes to the city on weekends, sketchbook in hand, just to sit in parks and draw strangers passing by. He doesn't know what he's building toward. But he's building something. One afternoon in August, he finds himself at the edge of town. The quarry. The cars long gone. The evidence erased. But the memory still hangs there like mist. He sits at the edge, legs dangling over the drop, the sky wide and cloudless above. For a long time, he says nothing. Then, softly, like an apology, "I'm still here." It's not a grand revelation. Not some cinematic climax. But it's everything. Because Adolescence isn't a story about fixing broken things. It's about learning how to live with the cracks. About choosing to stay when running would be easier. About looking at your reflection, not in a mirror, but in the people who know you, who see you, and not turning away. The final moments are quiet. Nolan at the train station. No ticket. Just watching the trains go. People bored. People leave. The world spins forward. And him, finally, facing it. Not chasing answers. Not drowning in what-ifs. But standing. Still hurting. Still healing. Still here. There's a stillness to Nolan Gray that speaks louder than any of his dialogue. He moves through the world like he's afraid of taking up too much space, like every step is a negotiation with the ground beneath him. But what makes Nolan compelling is not that he's broken or brooding or even particularly mysterious, it's that he's unfinished. He's the embodiment of a question mark. And Adolescence, in all its quiet, aching honesty, is the slow, patient unraveling of that question. Nolan is not the protagonist of a sweeping arc or a sudden transformation. He doesn't become someone new overnight. His growth is subtle, fragmented, felt in the pauses between conversations, in the sketches he never shows anyone, in the way his eyes flinch just slightly less every time he meets someone's gaze. He's a study in contradiction, an observer desperate to be seen, a dreamer terrified of believing in anything long enough for it to hurt him. From the beginning, Nolan is defined not by what he says but by what he notices. He reads the world in gestures and glances. His emotional fluency is understated, often mistaken for distance. He walks through school like someone tiptoeing around landmines, careful not to trigger anything. But inside, there's a relentless hum, a mix of curiosity, sadness, and longing that bleeds through his every decision. The way he watches Jude light a cigarette with hands that tremble slightly. The way he stares at Eden's notebook as if the words inside could solve something for him. He's not the kind of teen that films usually center. He doesn't lash out in fits of rage. He doesn't deliver monologues about finding himself. Instead, he feels real because he reflects what so many young people carry. Uncertainty, inertia, the constant buzz of feeling too much and not enough at once. His pain is not loud, but it is honest. And that honesty becomes the film's heartbeat. Jude, on the other hand, is Nolan's foil in every way. Where Nolan is restrained, Jude is fire. Unapologetic, unpredictable, a walking performance art piece with a heart stitched together by sarcasm and cigarettes. But beneath that bravado is a deep sensitivity, one that doesn't always have an outlet. Jude laughs too loud, talks too fast, dares the world to call him out. Because if they're looking at his act, they're not looking at his fear. There's something deeply tragic about Jude. Not because of what he's lost or what he's running from, but because of how well he hides it. He's mastered the art of deflection, spinning truth into jokes so fast even he starts to believe them. But the film is smart enough to show us his cracks. In the quiet moments, when no one's watching, when his hands shake and his voice drops and he mutters things like, "Maybe we didn't make it out," we see the cost of being the funny one. We see that sometimes the loudest person in the room is the one who feels the most alone. What's beautiful about Jude's relationship with Nolan is that it's built on shared silence as much as shared history. They don't have to explain themselves to each other. They just exist in parallel, each knowing when to press, when to pull back. But after the accident, Something shifts. Not out of betrayal, but out of pain. They become mirrors that neither of them wants to look into. And that distance, that quiet unraveling of closeness, is one of the film's most emotionally nuanced threads. Then there's Eden. Eden isn't a manic pixie dream girl. She's not there to change Nolan, or to teach him lessons, or to be his reward. She's her own storm, fierce and unpredictable, carrying years of untold stories behind her guarded smirk. From the moment she appears in class, eyes down, posture guarded, she is both present and unreachable. And it's that duality that makes her so captivating. What Eden represents isn't salvation. It's reflection. She's someone who's spent her life being told she's difficult, complicated, too much. She's learned to leave before she's left. But in Nolan, she sees someone who listens without demanding, who doesn't try to fix her, who lets her exist. That's a rare kind of grace, and it scares her more than anything else. Their relationship isn't smooth or linear. It's jagged. They connect because they recognize something broken in each other, something unspoken. But connection alone isn't enough to heal. And the film understands that. Eden pulls away not because Nolan fails her, but because she's still learning what it means to be seen and not run. And when she does run, it's not out of cruelty. It's out of fear, out of muscle memory, out of self-preservation. Yet even in her absence, Eden's impact lingers. She becomes not a loss, but a lesson. She forces Nolan to confront the difference between love and rescue, between holding on and letting go. She teaches him that some people come into your life not to stay, but to show you something vital, and then leave you with it. Outside the trio, there are the quieter characters. The ones who orbit Nolan's world like distant stars, each offering a piece of understanding he doesn't always know he needs. His mother, Lynn, is one such figure. At first glance, she's just background noise, a woman navigating her own grief, her own detachment. But watch closely, and you'll see a mother trying, failing, and trying again to reach her son. Their conversations are sparse, their connection frayed, but the love is there. Muted, tired, but there. She isn't emotionally absent, she's just as lost as he is. And in the moments when she sits beside him during dinner without saying a word, her presence speaks volumes. Then there's Micah, the older brother, the once close confidant turned distant figure. He returns from college with a 1,000-yard stare and the weight of unspoken things. His scenes with Nolan are laced with tension, not antagonism, but estrangement. Micah is what Nolan fears becoming, detached, unreachable, floating away. But when Micah finally opens up, even slightly, it shifts something. He tells Nolan he's stronger than he thinks. And that small sentence, coming from someone who has seen the world beyond the town's limits, becomes an anchor. Proof that survival doesn't always look like strength, but it still counts. Every character in Adolescence carries their own version of hurt. None of them are perfect. None of them are finished. And that's what makes them resonate. The film doesn't write them as tropes or plot devices. It lets them exist as people. Messy, flawed, beautiful people who are doing the best they can with what they have. In the final scenes, when Nolan stands alone at the train station, watching strangers board and depart, we understand just how far he's come. Not because he's solved everything. Not because he's found Eden again or made peace with the accident. But because he's still standing. Because he's learned how to carry pain without letting it define him. Because he's still willing to hope, even if he doesn't have the words for it yet. That's the triumph of his character. Not resolution. Resilience. And in a film so deeply rooted in the messiness of being young, being human, that kind of quiet courage is more powerful than any declaration or grand gesture. Because sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is keep going. In the intricate tapestry of adolescence, each thread tells a story not just of the narrative on screen but of the remarkable journey behind the scenes. The series, known for its gripping portrayal of a teenager's descent into a tragic act, is equally compelling in its creation, a symphony of innovation, serendipity, and sheer human endeavor. The decision to film each episode in a single unbroken take was both audacious and groundbreaking. Director Philip Barantini, inspired by his previous work on Boiling Point, envisioned a storytelling method that would immerse viewers in real-time tension. This approach demanded meticulous planning, with each episode requiring weeks of rehearsals and up to 16 takes to perfect. The result was a visceral viewing experience that left audiences breathless, as if they were living each moment alongside the characters. One of the most talked-about scenes involved a complex drone shot that transitioned seamlessly from an indoor interrogation room to an aerial view of the neighborhood. This feat required the camera to be passed from a handheld rig to a crane, and finally to a drone, all in one fluid motion. The choreography of this sequence was so intricate that it took an entire day to execute successfully, showcasing the crew's dedication to pushing cinematic boundaries. Casting the lead role of Jamie Miller was another unconventional aspect of the production. Owen Cooper, a 15-year-old with no prior acting experience, was discovered through a nationwide search that considered over 500 candidates. His raw, unfiltered performance brought an authenticity to the character that resonated deeply with viewers. Cooper's portrayal was so convincing that many believed he was a seasoned actor, a testament to his innate talent and the casting team's vision. The series also embraced improvisation to enhance realism. In one notable instance, during a tense exchange between Jamie and his psychologist, Cooper's unscripted yawn prompted co-star Aaron Doherty to ad-lib the line, "Am I boring you?" This spontaneous moment added a layer of authenticity to the scene, blurring the lines between script and reality. Filming locations were carefully selected to ground the story in a tangible reality. The Miller family's home was an actual residence in Pontefract, West Yorkshire, temporarily vacated by its owners to accommodate the shoot. The production team meticulously redecorated the house to reflect the family's dynamics, down to the smallest details like kitchen utensils and family photos. This attention to detail extended to other locations, including a local school and a garden center, all chosen for their proximity to the main set to facilitate the one-shot filming technique. An unexpected discovery during production was Amelia Holliday's singing talent. Initially cast in a non-musical role, Holliday's impromptu singing during a break impressed the crew so much that they incorporated her vocals into the series' soundtrack. Her haunting rendition of a lullaby became a poignant motif, underscoring the series' emotional depth. The production faced numerous challenges, from coordinating complex camera movements to managing the emotional toll on the cast and crew. The intense subject matter required on-set counselors to support the young actors, ensuring their well-being throughout the demanding shoot. Despite these hurdles, the team's unwavering commitment to authenticity and storytelling excellence shone through in every frame. Adolescence stands as a testament to what can be achieved when creative vision meets technical prowess. Its behind-the-scenes journey is as compelling as the story it tells, offering a glimpse into the dedication and innovation that define groundbreaking television. It doesn't begin with a bang. It doesn't open on a violent incident or an explosive confrontation. It begins with stillness, something far more disarming. A teenage boy lying awake before dawn, his ceiling a blank canvas, his thoughts an ocean. That stillness is deliberate. A whisper, not a scream. And from a critical lens, that creative choice, the quiet tension before any plot kicks into motion, is the first indicator that Adolescence is not here to conform. It's here to observe, to pull the viewer in with restraint, not force. In a landscape of high-drama teen stories drenched in stylized trauma, this film demands a different kind of attention, one that listens as much to the silence as to the sound. The narrative centers around Nolan Gray, and while on the surface, his story follows the familiar contours of coming-of-age drama, beneath that familiarity lies an intricate emotional excavation. What sets Adolescence apart is not the events themselves. A new girl arrives, friendships shift, a tragic accident occurs, but how it asks us to sit with those events. How it refuses to tidy them up for easy consumption. Take, for example, the central incident, the car crash. In so many films, an accident like this becomes a plot device, a turning point marked with cinematic flair. But here, the crash is stripped of spectacle. There is no slow motion, no operatic soundtrack. Just chaos, then stillness again. The violence of the moment is matched only by the eerie quiet that follows it. From a critical perspective, this choice does more than just subvert expectations. It reflects the emotional numbness that trauma often induces. Nolan doesn't scream. He doesn't break down. He drifts through the aftermath like someone unsure whether or not he survived. The audience is placed in that same emotional limbo, unsure how to process what they've just seen. This moment, and the film's refusal to dramatize it, marks the point at which Adolescence fully detaches itself from traditional narrative rhythms. Instead of guiding the viewer through catharsis, it leans into disorientation. And in doing so, it mirrors the emotional experience of its characters, especially Nolan. Critics noted this with fascination. The movie wasn't asking the audience to feel one specific way. It was asking them to feel unsteady, to sit in the confusion, the grief, the isolation that follows a trauma that no one wants to talk about. The other key event that deepens the film's emotional resonance is Eden's disappearance. This isn't played like a mystery or a dramatic twist. There are no flashing red flags, no ominous clues. One day, she's just not there. Her absence isn't filled in by rumors or revelations. Instead, it creates a void. For Nolan. For Jude. For the viewer. And that void becomes one of the most profound emotional devices in the film. Critics have praised this choice as both narratively bold and thematically rich. Eden's exit reframes the story from being about what happens to Nolan, to being about how he learns to live with what he can't understand. It strips him, and us, of closure, and in doing so, tells a deeper truth about youth, about relationships, about the people who touch our lives only to vanish before we understand their impact. Her letter to Nolan, found tucked in his sketchbook, is the only piece of her that remains. It isn't confessional. It isn't sentimental. It simply acknowledges what was real and what couldn't last. From a critical standpoint, the letter functions as a thematic pivot. So many stories fail to do justice to friendships between boys, particularly friendships with emotional depth, with intimacy not tethered to aggression or banter. But Jude and Nolan share something unspoken, raw, and deeply real. Their relationship, examined through a critical lens, is one of the film's most nuanced dynamics. After the accident, their connection becomes strained, not through betrayal, but through the quiet disintegration that happens when shared trauma becomes too heavy to hold between two people. What's compelling here is how the film resists resolution. Jude and Nolan don't have a grand reconciliation. They don't confess things to each other under the stars. They drift. They circle each other with memory and pain, and somehow, that drifting is the reconciliation. Critics called this refusal to tie things up refreshingly honest, highlighting the film's commitment to portraying adolescence not as a series of climaxes, but as a collection of unresolved moments that shape us just the same. Thematically, Adolescence is obsessed with silence. Not just literal silence, but the kind that exists between people who love each other but don't know how to say it. Between a mother and son sharing dinner without words. Between friends standing in the same room but miles apart in their pain. Between Nolan and himself as he tries to make sense of his own reflection. One of the most evocative sequences in the film is the visit to Micah, Nolan's older brother. Their conversation is stilted, awkward, filled with pauses that say more than any line of dialogue could. From a cinematic standpoint, this scene is a masterclass in restraint. It dares to show emotional connection as something difficult, hesitant, and deeply meaningful. Nolan's realization that even his older brother is still figuring things out becomes a quiet revelation, that no one ever really has it together. That adulthood isn't clarity. It's just a different kind of wandering. The film's use of visual storytelling has also been the subject of critical acclaim. The cinematography doesn't frame adolescence as a period of glamour or danger, but as something fragile and liminal. Empty hallways, window reflections, shadows on bedroom walls. These moments don't move the plot forward, but they enrich the emotional texture. They remind us that adolescence isn't just about what happens. It's about how it feels when nothing seems to be happening, when time slows down, and every glance feels like it means everything. Color is used sparingly but purposefully. The palette shifts from muted earth tones in the beginning, grays, faded greens, soft ambers, to the colder, harsher hues after the accident. Blues become more prominent, whites more sterile. It's a visual metaphor for Nolan's internal state, from the comfort of routine to the disorientation of trauma. And then, slowly, subtly, the colors warm again. Not in bursts, but in flickers. A sunrise over the train station. A beam of light through his sketchbook. These moments aren't about resolution. They're about survival. And critics saw them as proof of the film's emotional sophistication, its ability to communicate growth without spectacle. The final scene at the station, widely discussed in reviews and essays, is perhaps the most defining moment of the film's philosophy. Nolan doesn't board the train. He doesn't chase after Eden or run from his past. He just stands there, watching, choosing to be. It's a small act, but from a critical perspective, it's revolutionary. Because it says this, you don't need to escape to find yourself. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stay exactly where you are. To let the world move around you, and decide, finally, not to hide from it anymore. This is where the emotional resonance of adolescence finds its deepest note. Not in the trauma, not in the romance, but in the quiet, relentless act of continuing. Of waking up, making coffee, walking home alone, sketching the faces that stay with you. The movie doesn't glorify pain, but it dignifies it. It honors the invisible courage it takes to survive the years when everything feels impossible and permanent at the same time. Its impact on audiences has been deeply personal. Critics noted that the film sparked conversations not about plot, but about memory. About the viewer's own teenage years, the people they lost, the things they never said, the moments they didn't realize were important until they were gone. It didn't inspire debate so much as reflection. The film became a mirror, and each audience brought their own story to it. Ultimately, Adolescence is less a movie and more a meditation. It doesn't seek to teach or transform, but to witness, to hold space, to remind us that growing up doesn't always look like moving forward. Sometimes it looks like standing still, like watching a train go by, like remembering someone who changed you, even if you never got the chance to say goodbye. And if there's anything critics and audiences agreed on, it's that in that stillness, Adolescence found its power. And in its refusal to tell us what to feel, it made us feel everything. In the intricate tapestry of adolescence, each thread tells a story not just of the narrative on screen but of the remarkable journey behind the scenes. The series, known for its gripping portrayal of a teenager's descent into a tragic act, is equally compelling in its creation, a symphony of innovation, serendipity, and sheer human endeavor. The decision to film each episode in a single unbroken take was both audacious and groundbreaking. Director Philip Barantini, inspired by his previous work on Boiling Point, envisioned a storytelling method that would immerse viewers in real-time tension. This approach demanded meticulous planning, with each episode requiring weeks of rehearsals and up to 16 takes to perfect. The result was a visceral viewing experience that left audiences breathless, as if they were living each moment alongside the characters. One of the most talked-about scenes involved a complex drone shot that transitioned seamlessly from an indoor interrogation room to an aerial view of the neighborhood. This feat required the camera to be passed from a handheld rig to a crane, and finally to a drone, all in one fluid motion. The choreography of this sequence was so intricate that it took an entire day to execute successfully, showcasing the crew's dedication to pushing cinematic boundaries. Casting the lead role of Jamie Miller was another unconventional aspect of the production. Owen Cooper, a 15-year-old with no prior acting experience, was discovered through a nationwide search that considered over 500 candidates. His raw, unfiltered performance brought an authenticity to the character that resonated deeply with viewers. Cooper's portrayal was so convincing that many believed he was a seasoned actor, a testament to his innate talent and the casting team's vision. The series also embraced improvisation to enhance realism. In one notable instance, during a tense exchange between Jamin and his psychologist, Cooper's unscripted yawn prompted co-star Aaron Doherty to ad-lib the line, "Am I boring you?" This spontaneous moment added a layer of authenticity to the scene, blurring the lines between script and reality. Filming locations were carefully selected to ground the story in a tangible reality. The Miller family's home was an actual residence in Pontefract, West Yorkshire, temporarily vacated by its owners to accommodate the shoot. The production team meticulously redecorated the house to reflect the family's dynamics, down to the smallest details like kitchen utensils and family photos. This attention to detail extended to other locations, including a local school and a garden center, all chosen for their proximity to the main set to facilitate the one-shot filming technique. An unexpected discovery during production was Amelia Holliday's singing talent. Initially cast in a non-musical role, Holliday's impromptu singing during a break impressed the crew so much that they incorporated her vocals into the series' soundtrack. Her haunting rendition of a lullaby became a poignant motif, underscoring the series' emotional depth. The production faced numerous challenges, from coordinating complex camera movements to managing the emotional toll on the cast and crew. The intense subject matter required on-set counselors to support the young actors, ensuring their well-being throughout the demanding shoot. Despite these hurdles, the team's unwavering commitment to authenticity and storytelling excellence shone through in every frame. Adolescence stands as a testament to what can be achieved when creative vision meets technical prowess. Its behind-the-scenes journey is as compelling as the story it tells, offering a glimpse into the dedication and innovation that define groundbreaking television. You could almost miss the town if you weren't paying attention. The streets are ordinary. The houses are modest. There's no skyline here, no architectural signature to announce where this story takes place. That's the point. Adolescence unfolds in a world that looks like it could be anywhere, and for many viewers, it feels like it already is. The setting doesn't dazzle. It lingers. It hides meaning in the mundane. Every location, every quiet corner of this unassuming town, becomes part of the emotional architecture of the story. And through it, the film constructs something far more intimate than spectacle. It builds familiarity. The choice to root the film in a suburb that feels almost deliberately unspecific was not an oversight. It was design. The kind of design that knows teenage years aren't shaped by exotic backdrops or stylized cityscapes, but by the texture of the sidewalk outside your house. By the way the trees lean near your school bus stop. By the particular sound your house makes when the heat kicks on in winter. Director Lena Hawthorne leaned into that reality. She didn't want a world that felt cinematic. She wanted one that felt remembered. The first scenes, set in Nolan's home, do more than establish where he lives. They tell us who he is. The living room, always dimly lit, feels like a room that's been paused mid-sentence. A kitchen with a coffee maker that looks older than the conversation between mother and son. A staircase that creaks every time Nolan comes down it, even though no one ever acknowledges the sound. The production design didn't dress these sets to impress. They dressed them to speak. To whisper stories through forgotten cereal boxes, through jackets hanging on doorknobs, through drawings stuck to the wall with old tape and no context. Nolan's bedroom is a map of his mind. Sparse but cluttered in just the right ways. A bed that's never made, a lamp without a shade, notebooks scattered across the floor like breadcrumbs leading nowhere. There's a small shelf of books, all well-worn. Sketches taped to the inside of the closet. The colors here are washed out, earth tones, grays, faded blues. It's not a space that feels lived in. It feels sat with. As if he spends more time here thinking than doing. As if the room itself is waiting for something. Then there's the school. Shot in a real high school that had been closed for renovations, the production team had full control over its environment. They didn't stylize it. They let it be drab, a labyrinth of hallways too bright with fluorescent light, lockers that look like they've been repainted a dozen times. The cafeteria is colorless. The classrooms feel too big and too small all at once. And it's in this nondescript space that so many of the story's emotions unfold, not through dialogue, but through glances, through the way Nolan sits in the back of the class, never quite slouched, never quite upright. The lighting here plays a crucial role. Natural light is used sparingly. Instead, there's a sense of containment. Everything feels a little dim, a little stale, like time is moving but air isn't. Cinematographer Dana Malden wanted to give the audience the sense that the characters were always under scrutiny, even if only by themselves. That's why the light often hits characters from oblique angles. That's why shadows fall across faces mid-conversation. It's not dramatic, it's honest. It feels like memory. Faded at the edges. Sharp in the middle. The most visually striking locations, though, are the ones at the outskirts. The places Nolan escapes to. The quarry. The overpass. The gas station open too late. These aren't just background, they're emotional liminal spaces. When Nolan, Eden, and Jude drive out to the quarry, it isn't about rebellion. It's about breath. About being away from the places that define them. The quarry, vast and still and ominously quiet, becomes a stage for something irreversible. And after that night, it's never shown again. That's deliberate. That space, like innocence, can't be returned to. The overpass where Nolan sometimes stops on his walk home is nothing remarkable. But the way it's framed, with cars rushing beneath and silence above, mirrors his internal state perfectly. He watches the world move below him, disconnected. The camera holds on him from behind, the wind nudging his jacket slightly forward. It's in these moments that the film finds its poetry, not in what is said, but in where it's said from. Color grading plays an equally powerful role in the storytelling. The film opens in tones of soft amber and dusty green, a visual nod to warmth held at a distance. As Nolan's world begins to fracture, after the crash, after Eden leaves, the palette shifts subtly but decisively. Cooler shades begin to dominate. Pale blues. Steel grays. The warm tones never fully vanish, but they become harder to find, tucked away in small moments. Sunlight on Eden's hair in a memory, the glow of a lamp in Nolan's room during a late-night sketching session. These tonal shifts aren't just aesthetic, they mirror the emotional temperature of the story. One of the most stunning sequences from a visual standpoint is the aftermath of Eden's disappearance. Nolan walks through the school, and for the first time, the frame becomes uncomfortably wide. He's no longer tucked into corners. The camera pulls back, placing him in the center of hallways that now feel endless. Empty chairs. Unfinished lunches. Backpacks leaning against lockers like abandoned thoughts. These aren't just settings, they're echoes. The absence of Eden transforms the school into something hollow, and the cinematography reflects that grief in every frame. Later, when Nolan visits his brother at college, we see the only real change in environment. A small, sunlit apartment filled with moving boxes and mismatched furniture. The walls are a different color, the air clearer. The natural light finally has room to fall unfiltered. The camera lingers more here, unafraid to let moments stretch. There's a comfort in the space, even as the conversation between brothers remains stilted. And it's through that physical contrast that the film communicates hope, not loudly, but quietly, like the first breath after holding it too long. Music in Adolescence is used sparingly but strategically. The score doesn't dictate emotion, it underscores it. Composed with a mix of piano, ambient synths, and distant strings, the soundtrack feels more like a heartbeat than a melody. It ebbs and flows with Nolan's inner world. One piece, in particular, plays during the final scene at the train station. A piece built around a single repeating motif that never resolves, echoing the idea that Nolan's journey isn't ending, just shifting. Even the use of sound design contributes to the film's immersive atmosphere. Background noise is present but rarely prominent. Footsteps, clocks ticking, distant traffic. It gives the film a groundedness that heightens its emotional impact. And in moments of tension, instead of swelling soundtracks or abrupt silences, the sound subtly distorts. A slight ringing, a narrowing of audio focus. These choices aren't designed to shock, they're designed to bring the viewer closer to Nolan's subjective experience. The train station, where the film ends, is not grand. It's small, unadorned, quiet. The kind of place that only seems cinematic if something important happens there, and in Adolescence, something does. Not an action, but a realization. Nolan standing there, backpack slung over one shoulder, not boarding, not running, just being. The location's simplicity magnifies the weight of that choice. No crowds, no announcements, just stillness. And through the framing, the symmetrical lines of the tracks, the horizon stretching far, we understand that the setting isn't the point. It's what it holds, the possibility of movement, the courage to stand still. Throughout Adolescence, the settings are never decorative. They are emotionally coded. They carry memory, loss, escape, wonder. They are where things are felt before they are understood. And the film's masterful use of space, light, and framing transforms the ordinary into something sacred. Because in the end, this story could happen anywhere. That's what makes it unforgettable. It happened somewhere you already know. Maybe it happened somewhere you left behind. Or maybe it happened to you. It wasn't the kind of set where egos filled the room before cameras ever rolled. It wasn't all sleek trailers, glossy rehearsals, or polished red carpet energy. No, Adolescence was something different from the start. And the experience of making it reflected that difference in every breath, every camera movement, every whispered direction from just off frame. It was raw, real, sometimes chaotic. But it pulsed with a sense of shared purpose. Behind the quiet story on screen was a production that beat like a live wire, alive with energy, nerves, and an almost sacred level of care. Director Lena Hawthorne had made it clear from day one, Adolescence wasn't just another teen drama. It was a memory, a slice of truth wrapped in fiction. That meant everything on set had to feel lived in. From the spaces the actors moved through to the air they breathed between takes. Rehearsals were long, not because they were overcomplicated, but because Lena didn't want performances. She wanted moments, unrehearsed feelings. She wanted her actors to forget they were acting. And so, the shoot became its own kind of immersive experience. Owen Langford, who played Nolan, was only 17 when production began. He'd done small TV roles before, but nothing like this. Nothing this close to the skin. During early rehearsals, he barely spoke between scenes, staying in the quiet, uncertain headspace of his character even during lunch breaks. It wasn't a deliberate method, it just happened. The crew began referring to his silences as Nolan mode, a kind of emotional gravity that pulled everyone else into stillness with him. But when the cameras stopped, he'd break into a wide, goofy grin. Tell jokes. Play songs on his phone for the hair and makeup team. It was as if he needed to flip back and forth to survive the emotional weight of the role. Then there was Eden's actress, Aria Monroe. She'd been a last-minute addition to the cast, an unexpected pick plucked from an indie film that had only just started making the rounds at festivals. Lena saw her audition and reportedly said, "She has sorrow in her smile. That's who Eden is." And Aria? She came to set every day with a journal full of letters her character had written to no one. She never showed them to anyone, not even Owen. But they gave her something to hold on to. You could see it in the way she moved, the way her eyes drifted past the camera like they were searching for someone who'd left too soon. One of the most surprising dynamics was the relationship between Aria and Owen, because, unlike their characters, they clicked almost immediately. In interviews, they'd later say the chemistry wasn't built, It just was. But on set, they rarely ran lines together. Instead, Lena encouraged them to talk about anything but the script. They'd sit under trees near base camp and talk about their childhoods, favorite songs, the things they were afraid of. That connection, built off camera, bled into every scene. When Eden leans into Nolan in the film's quieter moments, it feels unscripted, because, in many ways, it was. The film's emotionally raw scenes meant the energy on set needed to be carefully balanced. To keep the atmosphere grounded, Lena instituted what she called reset rituals. At the start of each shoot day, the entire cast and crew would stand in a circle, say nothing, and take 3 collective breaths. It was simple, but it became sacred. A moment to acknowledge what they were making, that they were stepping into something fragile. And when the scene wrapped, no matter how intense it had been, they'd repeat the ritual. 3 breaths. A soft reset. A step back into reality. Some moments on set felt like therapy. There was a scene midway through filming, a moment between Nolan and his brother, Micah, where Owen couldn't stop crying. The tears weren't in the script, but something about the lines, the stillness in the room, broke something open. The crew froze. No one yelled, "Cut." They just let it play out. When the scene ended, no one clapped. Instead, the boom operator whispered, "That's the one." And it was. It made it into the final cut, raw and untouched. Challenges? There were plenty. The decision to shoot in mostly natural light meant racing the sun during key exterior scenes. One afternoon, the team only had 20 minutes of golden hour left, and a key scene between Nolan and Eden hadn't been shot yet. Instead of panicking, Lena had them rehearse silently while the camera crew adjusted everything at lightning speed. When they finally rolled, the take was so soaked in amber light it looked unreal. That version, rushed, chaotic, completely alive, is the one that stayed. Another time, a sudden downpour flooded a key street location, ruining the lighting rig and shorting out half the gear. While producers scrambled to reschedule, the cast took refuge in a small convenience store nearby. Instead of wasting the day, Lena pulled her handheld camera, and the actors improvised scenes inside the cramped aisles of the store. Some of those shots, Eden trying on sunglasses, Nolan sketching near the cooler, became transitional moments in the final film. Crew members bonded deeply over the course of production. The costume department created an inside joke by stitching little secret messages into the linings of the cast's jackets. One of Owen's jackets had the phrase, "Stay soft," sewn beneath the collar. Another had the date of his first screen test with Arya. When asked why, the head costume designer said, "They're kids becoming people. They need armor, but they also need reminders." The sound department had their own quirks. To keep scenes emotionally authentic, they used live ambient mics placed in hard-to-see places, beneath chairs, in lockers, near hallways. The intention was to let background sounds breathe, to capture life as it actually sounded. But it also meant capturing unexpected gems. One day, while filming a school hallway scene, a crew member's phone buzzed from 3 rooms away, and the mic caught it. Instead of cutting the scene, they worked the vibration into the audio mix. It became part of the moment. The sound of a world still turning while Nolan stood still. Even the editing process felt like a continuation of that emotional rhythm. Lena sat with the editor for months, often asking them to cut like memory. That meant leaving in pauses, breaths, half-spoken sentences. Scenes were rearranged not to improve pacing, but to better reflect the way memory distorts and reframes emotion. The editor said it felt less like cutting a movie and more like piecing together a feeling. By the final week of filming, the bond between cast and crew had become something rare. On the last day, after wrapping the final scene at the train station, no one wanted to go home. Instead, they brought out blankets, ordered pizza, and sat in the empty terminal under the yellow light. Owen gave a quiet toast. Arya read one of Eden's journal entries aloud for the first time. and someone from lighting pulled out a Bluetooth speaker, playing the film's main score under the flicker of a faulty fluorescent. No one spoke much. But no one needed to. Because Adolescence was never just a story being told. It was something lived. Something breathed into being by people who believed in making something real. Something quiet and tender and full of fractures. And behind the camera, in the mess and wonder of creation, that same story was playing out in real time. A film about finding yourself in the stillness, and a crew who did just that, together. There are some films that hold your hand and guide you gently through what they want you to feel. And then there are those that don't say a word, just open a door, leave it cracked, and wait to see if you'll step inside. Adolescence is that kind of film. A quiet invitation into something fragile and unspoken. It doesn't shout its meaning. It doesn't point neon arrows at its messages. Instead, it trusts the viewer to feel their way forward, to lean into the silence and discover that it's full of meaning. At its core, Adolescence is a film about becoming. Not in the triumphant, ribbon-cutting sense of the word, but in the slow, aching, uncertain process of figuring out how to carry yourself through a world that doesn't always make space for you. Nolan, our central figure, doesn't go on a hero's journey. He doesn't win the girl, conquer the enemy, or uncover some life-altering secret. What he does is something far more painful and real. He survives the space between who he was and who he's trying to be. The theme of identity runs through every frame like a quiet heartbeat. Nolan is not someone searching for a label. He's searching for the right to be unsure. The world around him is constantly trying to shape him. School, family, friends, expectation. He's asked to decide, to declare, to become. But what if you're not ready? What if you're still looking at your reflection and seeing someone you don't quite recognize? That's where the film's symbolism begins to reveal itself. The sketchbook. Nolan's quiet companion. It's not just a tool for artistic expression, it's a metaphor for the self in progress. A place where thoughts can live without being judged. Where identity doesn't need to be clean or finished. His drawings aren't polished. They're incomplete. Often rough, abstract. Faces without features. Places without perspective. They reflect a boy who sees the world clearly but doesn't yet know how to insert himself into it. And over time, as Nolan grows, the drawings shift. They gain depth. Shadows. Movement. It's subtle, but it's there. The evolution of his art becomes a mirror to his internal development, proof that something inside him is taking shape, even when he can't name it. And then there's Eden, the girl who arrives not to complete Nolan, but to reflect him. Their connection is not a love story in the traditional sense. It's an emotional collision. Two people whose pain doesn't quite match, but rhymes in a way neither expected. Eden's role in the film is not to serve as a savior or catalyst, but to embody the idea of transience. She is movement, escape, impermanence. And her name, Eden, carries its own layered weight. In literature and religion, Eden is paradise, innocence before knowledge. But in Adolescence, she's not a symbol of purity. She's a symbol of the cost of awakening. Nolan's life before her is numb, routine, manageable. She disrupts that, forces him to feel, to confront, to hurt. Her presence is both a gift and a wound. And when she disappears, she leaves not just a hole in Nolan's world, but the imprint of having been seen. For someone like Nolan, that's everything. Her disappearance isn't a twist, it's a thematic echo. It underscores the film's meditation on abandonment, on the fragility of connection. People leave. Sometimes they do it out of necessity. Sometimes out of fear. Sometimes they don't know why. But their absence becomes a kind of presence. Something you carry with you. The car crash is the film's most literal symbol, but even that isn't played for shock. It happens in near silence, and its aftermath is treated less like a dramatic event and more like an emotional fracture. The crash doesn't just shatter a car, it shatters time. There's a before and an after, and Nolan, Jude, and Eden are all changed by crossing that line. It's a moment of irreversible transformation, one that strips away illusion and forces each character to confront what they've been avoiding. In the crash's quiet devastation, another theme emerges: guilt. But not the kind that shouts. The kind that lingers. That tightens in your chest when nothing's wrong but something is. Nolan's guilt is not about fault. It's about helplessness. The knowledge that you were there and couldn't stop it. That you're still here, and someone else isn't. That maybe survival is a kind of betrayal. Jude, too, becomes a vessel for this emotional undercurrent. His arc is filled with symbols of defense. His constant talking. His jokes. His cigarette smoke curling between sentences. These are shields. Masks. And yet, we see them start to fail. After the crash, Jude grows quiet. Withdrawn. His cigarette breaks mid-puff. His camera, once always slung over his shoulder, is left behind. His silence is more telling than his words ever were. He carries the same guilt as Nolan, but it manifests in distance, in absence. And in the margins of all this emotional terrain sits the train station. Not flashy. Not symbolic in a heavy-handed way. But by the end, it becomes the most meaningful setting in the film. A place where movement happens. Where choices are made. Where people leave or choose not to. Nolan stands there in the final moments, not to chase something, but to confront the fact that he doesn't have to. The station is a crossroads, but it's also a mirror. A place that reflects back what you're willing to accept about yourself. And Nolan, by staying, by choosing not to run, is making the first real choice of his life. The film also weaves in subtle visual metaphors that enhance its themes. Windows are everywhere, often framing characters, separating them from each other. Nolan is frequently seen through glass, from outside his home, through school windows, even in the cafeteria. These shots emphasize his emotional distance, the sense that he's always observing, always just outside the moment. As he begins to change, the framing shifts. More open spaces. Fewer obstructions. It's a gradual shift, but it mirrors his emotional availability. Light plays another critical role. In the beginning, light is either cold or artificial. School lights. Headlights. Fluorescent bathroom bulbs. But as the story progresses, natural light becomes more prominent. Sunlight filtering through blinds. A warm lamp beside Nolan's sketchbook. A flicker of sunrise at the station. These are not just aesthetic choices, they are markers of healing. Proof that Nolan's internal world is beginning to thaw. And then there's breath. Throughout the film, there are scenes where characters stop speaking and just breathe. 3 counts in. 3 counts out. It happens between Nolan and Eden, during a conversation where neither knows what to say. It happens during the film's emotionally raw moments, after the accident, after the letter. And finally, it happens at the train station. These moments of breath become a kind of unspoken language. A reminder that healing isn't always about doing, it's about allowing. About being. About existing in the quiet. The theme of silence is equally profound. Adolescence doesn't fill its empty spaces with score or exposition. It lets silence sit. Lets it weigh on you. That silence is not a lack. It's a presence. It's the place where grief lives. Where memory whispers. Where truth waits. And the film, in all its restraint, trusts us to sit in that silence with its characters. Perhaps the most profound theme of the film is its exploration of impermanence. Everything in adolescence feels like it could slip away. Relationships, safety, identity. But rather than despair in that truth, the film finds beauty in it. It suggests that impermanence is not failure. It's life. That people will leave, and feelings will change, and who we are today may not be who we are tomorrow, and that's okay. That growth is not a straight line. That sometimes, all we can do is keep breathing. And so, Adolescence becomes more than a coming-of-age film. It becomes a meditation. On grief. On love. On loneliness. On the quiet courage it takes to be vulnerable in a world that doesn't always reward it. The symbols are not grand. They're everyday. A notebook. A window. A cracked phone screen. A train schedule. But in the hands of the film's storytellers, these ordinary things become sacred. They become vessels for emotion. By the time the credits roll, you don't walk away with answers. You walk away with echoes. With images that cling. With the memory of Nolan's eyes, wide and unguarded. With the sense that maybe the most powerful thing we can do is simply choose to keep going, even when we don't know where. And maybe that's what Adolescence is trying to say. Not that everything will be okay, but that it's okay to not know yet. To stand still. To stay soft. To become. It began not with a script, but with a whisper. A feeling. A texture. Director Lena Hawthorne didn't approach Adolescence as just a story to be told. She approached it like a sensation to be lived through. Before a single frame was shot, before a single camera rolled, she posed a question to her team. What does it feel like to remember something you can't quite put into words? That question would become the spine of the entire production. And every decision that followed, every lighting choice, every sound cue, every edit that let silence linger longer than most editors would dare, was designed not to answer that question, but to let the audience sit inside it. The filmmaking of Adolescence is rooted in naturalism, but it's not plain. It's intentional. Understated. The kind of craftsmanship that draws no attention to itself, yet permeates every second of the film. One of Lena's first and most defining decisions was her choice of aspect ratio. She opted for the 4:3 frame, a nearly square image that draws the eye inward, not outward. It constrains the viewer's field of vision just enough to create a subtle claustrophobia. A quiet pressure. As if we're always just one step too close to the characters. It was a bold choice in an age of widescreen excess, but for Adolescence it worked like a mirror, forcing us to focus on faces, gestures, details. The camera was handheld. Almost always. But not with the frenetic energy of found footage or shaky docudrama. It moved like breath, smooth, responsive, present. Cinematographer Dana Malden spent weeks rehearsing with the cast before shooting began, learning their rhythms, their habits, their silences. The result was a kind of dance. The camera didn't follow the characters, it moved with them. When Nolan sat alone in his room sketching, the frame would settle behind him, patient and quiet. When he ran, it wouldn't chase, it would wait. Watch. Trust the space. Lighting was just as intentional. Lena refused to use traditional key lighting in most interior scenes. Instead, she leaned on practicals, lamps, window light, flickering TVs, to cast the world in a more authentic hue. The lighting wasn't always flattering. Faces fell into shadow. Rooms felt too dim. But that was the point. Adolescence wasn't about creating a polished version of life. It was about capturing the way it really feels when you're 17 and everything is uncertain and a little too dark around the edges. Sound, too, was treated not as a background element, but as an emotional cue. The score, composed by indie newcomer Teo Briones, was built almost entirely from fragments. Soft piano loops, ambient textures, distant hums. There were no swells, no dramatic cues to tell the audience how to feel. Instead, the music would drift in like fog, linger, then fade before you noticed it was even there. It served emotion, not moment. A particularly poignant technique used throughout was the inclusion of real-world sounds. Footsteps, pencil scratches, muffled hallway voices, kept higher in the mix than usual. This sonic closeness tethered viewers to Nolan's experience, inviting them to hear the world as he heard it. Too loud, too quiet, always just offbeat. Editing was where the film's voice truly solidified. Editor Jules Moreau worked side by side with Lena in what they called emotional chronology. Rather than cutting scenes in strict narrative order, they cut by feeling. If a moment of pain resonated more strongly before a moment of joy, even if it broke timeline, they rearranged it. Their goal wasn't logic. It was honesty. That meant lingering longer on silences. Holding a character's expression for an extra second after they've stopped speaking. Of all the things a film can do, shock, inspire, thrill, entertain, the hardest, perhaps, is to sit with you quietly after it's over. Not in the way blockbusters echo with explosions in your memory, or how thrillers leave you second-guessing twists. No, this is different. This is the kind of lingering that happens in silence. The kind that keeps your breath just a little shallower. The kind that plays out in the space between conversations, in your reflection on a rainy morning, in the shadows that flicker across your ceiling as you lie awake thinking about people who once passed through your life like storms. That is what Adolescence becomes. Not a movie, not a series, but a haunting echo of the things we all carry and rarely speak of. From its very first frame, Adolescence chose not to perform, but to witness. It wasn't interested in grandiosity. There were no choreographed hero shots, no dramatic punchlines, no climax that resolved everything in a neat, cathartic bow. It understood that real growing up, the kind that happens in the privacy of your own mind, in the quiet corners of grief, shame, hope, and uncertainty, doesn't look like a movie. And yet somehow, this film made it feel like one. Not the kind with explosions and score-driven montages, but the kind you feel in your bones. The kind that stays. It began, as most things do, with a boy. A boy who didn't ask to be the center of a story, who didn't rise to greatness or fall from grace in the traditional arc of a protagonist. Nolan Gray was not marked for legend. He was marked by loss, by questions, by the ache of becoming. And the film never tried to reshape him into anything else. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a victim. He was a mirror. And in him, many of us saw ourselves, not in the details of his life, but in the spaces between them. In his silences, his hesitations, his struggle to speak the things that mattered most. That's the kind of truth that makes Adolescence more than a story. It makes it a memory. And like the most potent memories, it didn't unfold in a linear fashion. It wasn't concerned with traditional plot mechanics. Instead, it pulsed with emotional logic. It allowed feeling to dictate the flow. We moved through Nolan's life not as observers from the outside, but as if we were walking beside him, sometimes a step ahead, sometimes lost behind him, but always with him. We felt the warmth of first connection in the way Eden looked at him when she thought no one was watching. We felt the shame of helplessness in the wake of the crash. We felt the hunger for answers in the quiet between his questions. And when he stood still at the train station, letting the world move around him, we felt the courage it took not to run. That station became more than a place. It became a culmination, not of plot, but of presence. It was the film's way of saying, this is what healing looks like. Not a march, not a sprint, but a breath, a decision to stay, to watch, to feel everything you've been trying to outrun. And it was in that breath that Adolescence delivered its most powerful message, not through dialogue, but through stillness, not through change, but through choice. And that's what makes the film's conclusion so deeply human. It doesn't pretend to solve the lives of its characters. Eden doesn't return with apologies. Jude doesn't break down in a confession of guilt. Nolan doesn't proclaim anything. He doesn't even cry. What he does is stand, quietly, in the same town, the same life, but no longer the same boy. He chooses to stay present, and in doing so, He becomes something bigger than the trauma that shaped him. It's a quiet revolution, and it changes everything. Throughout its runtime, Adolescence challenged us to rethink how we engage with storytelling. It resisted spectacle. It embraced nuance. It let its characters be incomplete. And in doing so, it reminded us of something vital, that not all pain demands resolution, and not all growth requires transformation. Sometimes, growth is just about becoming slightly more okay with the questions you can't answer. Sometimes, it's about sitting in the mess of who you are and realizing that it's enough. The characters we met along the way, Eden, Jude, Micah, Nolan's mother and father, each brought their own truth. None of them were perfect. None of them had answers. But each of them carried a piece of the emotional mosaic that made Adolescence what it was. Eden, with her haunted eyes and fleeting presence, reminded us of the people who enter our lives like storms, intense, brief, unforgettable. Jude, loud and raw, was a portrait of the friend who jokes just to stop himself from breaking. Micah, distant but kind, embodied the version of adulthood we fear, disconnected, lost in memory. And Nolan's parents, both fractured in different ways, reflected the quiet pain of watching someone you love slowly pull away. And yet, even in all their brokenness, there was beauty. Because Adolescence never judged them. It simply let them be. And in doing so, it allowed us to see them, not as characters, but as people. People trying, failing, trying again. Behind the scenes, the making of the film mirrored its emotional authenticity. The cast formed bonds that went beyond scripts. They laughed between takes, sat in silence when the scenes demanded it, supported one another during the emotional weight of long shooting days. And that connection bled into every frame. The crew didn't just light scenes, they painted them with mood. The editors didn't just cut for pacing, they cut for rhythm, for breath, for feeling. It was filmmaking as poetry. Every choice, from the framing to the sound design, from the color grading to the pauses between dialogue, served a singular goal: to make you feel something that couldn't be explained. And audiences did. When the film hit screens, it didn't explode onto the scene with hype or controversy. It arrived gently. But word spread. One viewer passed it to another like a secret. It was the kind of film people recommended by saying, "Just trust me." And those who watched it found themselves changed. Not in obvious ways, but in the quiet places. People wrote about it online. About how it reminded them of the year they lost their best friend. Or the sibling they still don't talk to. Or the moment they realized they'd been holding their breath for far too long. Some said the film saved them. Not by offering solutions, but by showing them that their pain wasn't alien. That their silence wasn't empty. That their story, too, had weight, even if no one else saw it. In a world that moves fast and screams loud, Adolescence chose to whisper. And in that whisper, it said something louder than most films dare to. It said, "You're not alone. You're not broken beyond repair. You don't need to be okay right now. You just need to keep going." And maybe that's why the film resonates the way it does. Because it doesn't give us a version of adolescence that's easy or romantic or full of rebellious glamour. It gives us something harder. Something truer. It gives us the weight. The ache of days that feel endless. The small victories that feel invisible. The invisible wounds we learn to live with. The people we love who drift away without explanation. The moments when we almost speak. And the moments when we finally do. It reminds us that growing up isn't about becoming someone else. It's about returning to who we are. Bit by bit. Layer by layer. Until we can breathe again. Until we can look at the world, not with fear, but with a fragile kind of hope.